Hi, so in this video, we are going to look at the punctuation questions from the non-adaptive digital SAT test 1. So the first question is question 20. In ancient Greece, an Epicurean was a follower of Epicurus, a philosopher whose beliefs revolved around the pursuit of pleasure. Epicurus defined pleasure as the absence of pain in the body and of trouble in the dash, that all life's virtues derived from this absence. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? Now you see here that I'm starting a quotation mark here. So I need to close that quotation mark. And all these four options have the closing quotation mark after soul. So let me just read the sentence with soul and the closing quotation mark. Epicurus defined pleasure as the absence of pain in the body and of trouble in the soul, positing. To posit is to claim, claiming that all life's virtues derived from this absence. Now, this part, positing that all life's virtues derived from this absence, is not an independent clause, right? It can't stand on its own. So I can't have it after a semicolon or a full stop. So C and D are clearly wrong. Now, between A and B, a comma is better than a colon because the comma is completing an independent clause, what Epicurus defined pleasure as, and then positing that all life's virtues, that just brings the dependent part after the comma, right? A colon would make sense if I was explaining the first part with something that comes after the colon. While here, I'm not doing that. I'm using a verb, positing, to expand on what Epicurus said. So here, the right answer should be A. The next punctuation question in this test is 22. In 1937, Chinese-American screen actor Anna May Wong, who had portrayed numerous villains and secondary characters but never a heroine, finally got a starring role in Paramount Pictures' Daughter of Shanghai, a film that expanded the range of possibilities for Asian images on screen. Now, this is a part under quotation marks, which means that somebody must have said this or written this, and that someone is critic Steiner Chin. So we have to choose the right option here. Now, option A has two commas, which is not right because two commas are placed around information that is redundant, that is additional. And this information, the name of the critic, is not additional. I need to identify the critic who said this expression, right? So it can't be A. Okay, the same reason it can't be B because I have commas around Steiner Chin. Now, the problem with D is that you are putting a comma after claims. And you put a comma before a quotation when you have a full quotation, right? For example, he said, comma, I am going to attend the lecture tomorrow. So here I have a full sentence. I have this full quotation, and so a comma makes sense. But here, I'm not using the full quotation that Steiner Chin used. I'm using a part of her quotation in my own sentence. My own sentence is the sentence that is given here, the text. And so this comma will not be needed before the quotation, right? The right answer, therefore, would be C. And when I read it, I can see that I'm using her quotation in my sentence by saying that Anna May Wong finally got a starring role in Daughter of Shanghai, a film that critic Steiner Chin claims expanded the range of possibilities. So that expanded the range of possibilities. It's what Steiner Chin said, and I'm using that quotation, part of that quotation, in my own sentence. Okay, the next is 24. Researchers studying magnetosensation have determined why some soil-dwelling roundworms in the southern hemisphere move in the opposite direction of Earth's magnetic field when searching for dash. In the northern hemisphere, the magnetic field points down into the ground, but in the southern hemisphere, it points up towards the surface and away from worms' food sources. And then I have these options where I have a colon, a comma, while, and then no punctuation, and the word food is here. So I should read it with food to understand what punctuation to use. So researchers who study magnetosensation have determined why some soil-dwelling roundworms in the southern hemisphere move in the opposite direction of Earth's magnetic field when searching for food. Now, this sentence is establishing that there is an explanation for why these roundworms behave this way when searching for food. And that explanation is that in the northern hemisphere, the magnetic field points down into the ground, but in the southern hemisphere, it points up towards the surface. So because the second part is explaining something that the first part referred to, a colon would be the best answer, because that's what a colon does. It expands on what the first part has said. It provides details about what the first part has said, right? Okay, a comma can't come here because these are two independent sentences. So a comma would create a comma splice error. So that's wrong. While doesn't make sense because while is a contrasting conjunction and there's no contrast between the first and the second sentence. The second is an explanation of the first. And no punctuation would create a run-on sentence. So that also is an error. Okay, let's look at 27. In 1943, in the midst of World War II, mathematics professor Grace Hopper was recruited by the US military to help the war effort by solving complex equations. Hopper's subsequent career would involve more than just, and then I have to decide how to use equations though. As a pioneering computer programmer, Hopper would help usher in the digital age. Now, this kind of question where you have a conjunction coming at the end of the sentence. I've seen questions like this appear a lot for punctuation on the digital SAT. And you need to understand the construction before you can choose the answer. This though is coming at the end of this sentence. And this though is contrasting with the first sentence, right? Because the first sentence is saying that in the midst of this Second World War, math professor Grace Hopper was recruited by the military to help solve complex equations. But there's a but here, but her subsequent career would involve more than just equations, right? So when I say her subsequent career would involve more than just equations, though, that though is setting up a contrast with the first sentence, right? So that's the first thing I need to understand, which is why I cannot have an answer like C, because that though is now part of the third sentence, which is wrong. And I can't have an answer like D because that's just a run-on mistake. Now, between A and B, A is better because here, when I say that her subsequent career would involve more than just equations, I'm explaining that by saying that as a pioneering computer programmer, she would help usher in the digital age. So this part becomes an explanation of this part, how her subsequent career would involve more than just equations. And that's what a colon does. So this should be my answer. A comma here would not be right. One, because it would not establish that the though belongs to the first sentence, right? Because it would just be in the middle of the two sentences. And second, because this comma is creating a comma splice because there are two sentences that we are trying to join. So it's option A.